Hi, my peeps. This is Mr. McGlashan here. I'm just going to be giving a quick little rundown on the DBQ that I have assigned, just to help you organize the documents, understand them, and hopefully get yourself all set to write it. So as you know, we're doing this as a typed thing. And so let's see, how I start with the rubric here. That's the actual essay. But just to be clear, we have the typical elements of a College Board DBQ with context, thesis, documents and evidence, 6 documents, source analysis for 3, the complexity point. I have added organization, which is just typical writing standards, the ability to make sure, just making sure your paragraphs have a coherent idea in them and that there are transitions and that you have good topic sentences, that you have both an introduction and a conclusion, and that the thesis clearly tracks throughout the entire essay. And the other aspect is, of course, MLA formatting and agency and conventions, which is on-time format, MLA formatting, and write with good spelling and grammar. So I'm happy to get another one of these typed ones in because this is college-ready writing we're talking about here, not just AP, U.S. History, College Board stuff. All right, you guys, I love this DBQ because it requires a knowledge of the most important economics that there is. That is how we can stay out of monumental catastrophic depressions. So yes, listen to the 3 videos on boom and bust. Here's the DBQ. Note that it is sort of besides the stock market. Like, we get the stock market crash caused it, but don't tell me that, because what caused the stock market crash and what made a single crash turn into a 10-year catastrophic depression? Because I'll tell you what, this damn coronavirus thing is not causing more than 6 months of recession, I'll give it. And if it causes more than 6 months of recession, I'm going to kick his ass. You heard it here, coronavirus. No, so the issue is that poor decision-making by the United States government and other actors are why a crash led to so much. Okay, so craft a thesis. It's real simple. Say that the main causes of the Great Depression were. I'm not looking for a 2-sided thesis on this one. You're welcome to try to get complexity points by weighing the different strengths of the causes, meaning which caused it more and which caused it less. That's, of course, one of those complexity things that the College Board likes. But on this one, I would just say that showing a complex understanding of these complex issues is going to be enough, even if you have a standard, straightforward thesis that says the main causes of the Great Depression were poor policy by the Federal Reserve, a lack of fiscal stimulus by the government, and the lack of banking regulations, and the Smoot-Hawley tariff. You can just kind of list 3 or 4 and cover it that way. All right, folks, so let's start looking at the docs. You have the list, of course, of the causes of the Great Depression to work with. So go back to my PowerPoint or my slideshow on it, and you can look at the long list. But these documents are going to guide you towards 3 or 4 of those. So let's talk about what they are. Document A is the amount of debt that Americans were in. It is both public, meaning the government's debt, and people's debt. It is notable that the government debt did not shoot up during the Depression. So this part of the graph here can be used as an argument for why a lack of fiscal stimulus was an aggravating factor in the Great Depression, because they didn't throw money at it. If you see, the public debt, the U.S. government debt, didn't start going up until 1940. So this is with World War II spending, not with New Deal spending. So, but the private debt is a whole nother story. It's skyrocketing in the 20s, rising, and it peaks in 1933. And that is banks taking on too much debt. So if you would like to structure a paragraph that says something like poor decision-making by bankers and lack of banking regulation caused the banks to go kaput or to go bankrupt and cause bank runs, that's a reasonable cause. And you can just say escalating debt. The main culprits here, when we look at increasing debt, are the banks themselves. Why were they going into debt so much at that point? Well, because they were borrowing everything they could to put everything they could into the stock market, because it was just rising so fast. They needed every penny in there. Document B, I love this one. This is interest rates, and I showed it to you in the presentation. So go back to the presentation to get the full story. But remember that what we're talking about here is this section right here, 1920 to 1930. We have relative low interest rates, and then they go up in 28. So this is a core document if you're making the argument that poor policy by the Federal Reserve caused the Great Depression. Document C. This is income inequality. There's not much else in these documents about this, but you could throw in a quick paragraph at the beginning or the end that says the concentration of wealth in the hands of a few meant that the many did not have the spending power to keep buying products, something like that. But this document does kind of stand alone. I gave you a bunch of documents, so I would imagine some of you may ignore it. You could work it in however you want because you guys are creative and brilliant. All right, document D. This is just a standard textbook on why poor federal government, Fed policy, the Federal Reserve, why their mistakes caused the Great Depression. And it basically tells the same story that I told in my lecture. So yeah, it's Ben Bernanke. Remember, we got to do our sourcing. He was the chairman of the Federal Reserve from 2006 to 2014. He was known as the guy of the Great Depression, meaning he is also a PhD in economics and a professor at multiple impressive universities where he was known as being the expert on what caused the Great Depression, and then became the chairman of the Federal Reserve and happened to be there when the 2008 meltdown happened. So people actually felt in good hands at that point because they at least had the preeminent scholar on meltdowns in their midst. So he explains what they did wrong in the Depression. This one is Hoover's message where he signs the Smoot-Hawley tariff. Real simple. He's saying, it's going to be awesome. I'm protecting agricultural interests. This is great. Look at me for the farmers. Yay. Protectionism is good. It's going to help America. But what you know, and this is where we get to the sourcing, is you all know that he didn't know what he was talking about at the time. He didn't realize that what he was doing was setting off a trade war and a big meltdown. And so this is a good one to do some sourcing. But if you're just going to make the point that the Smoot-Hawley tariff was an ill-timed tariff, made the Depression worse, this is a good one. All right, bank failures. We're back to the one I started with, or I mentioned earlier, which is just the banks, that they melted down because of lack of bank regulation and because of poor decision-making by bankers, over-leveraging, going into too much debt. You saw this in my PowerPoint as well, bank failure. So you saw most of these documents. This one I love. This is a Breitbart News article, which you should know Breitbart is a mouthpiece for Trump. The guy who started Breitbart was then the head of Trump's campaign, but it's even further to the right, into the Looneyville of Trump. It is a right-wing mouthpiece. And here they are in 2018, right? Yeah, 2018, basically saying that tariffs didn't cause the Great Depression. It was not the Smoot-Hawley tariff, that's BS. Tariffs are great. Now, perfect opportunity for a point of view source analysis. Why would a pro-Trump loyalist in 2018 be saying that tariffs are great? Is it really about the tariffs, the Smoot-Hawley tariff? Is he really writing an article to inform us all about what caused the Great Depression? Not really. His beef is to basically support Trump's tariff. So great one for source analysis. I'm doing all the work for you, if you're listening. So how do we get another debt one in here? That's a screw up. You don't need that. All right, this one's interesting. This is a classic story of just banks and the lack of bank regulation caused the Great Depression. It goes on to describe how there were certain laws that some of the banks were supposed to follow, but they were all state and local laws, and they were not good enough. And if you keep reading, it basically says it says that a lack of banking regulation. So it's right here. The banks were not properly regulated. It's pretty simple. So that one, again, if you're going for that banking story, which probably is going to have to be part of your story, given how many documents there are. All right, this is a great one. This is Herbert Hoover in 1940. So this is, 8 years after he left the Oval Office, and he's going off about how basically FDR is a socialist, and these goddamn socialists, they want the government to run everything, and we got to get back to good liberty and capitalism. He's saying this 8 years into the New Deal. You can make what you want of this. You can say that he's stating this perspective in 1940, but he clearly always held it. This is a laissez-faire attitude by one of the 1920s conservative presidents, and their laissez-faire attitude that is clearly shown here was the cause of the Great Depression. You could also make the argument that some conservatives make today, which is that it was the New Deal programs themselves that were the problem, and that, in fact, the Great Depression was made worse by FDR's attempts to intervene in the economy. It's a less traditional argument, but you're welcome to make it. Document K. FDR's inaugural address. This is second to last document here, folks. almost done. Document K is FDR's inaugural address. It's a fairly famous speech. I believe this is the speech where he said, "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself." Darn, I got to work on my FDR, but he was a great speaker. Anyhow, he says a lot in this document about what caused the Depression and what they're going to do to solve it. And so when we're talking about causes, you could quote him here saying, the evils of the old order. There must be strict supervision of banking and credits and an end to speculation with other people's money. That's a good part to quote if you're trying to make the argument that the banks should have separated commercial and investment banking and not allow investment bankers to do crazy risky investments with our bank accounts, which is one of our causes. Document L, this is if you're trying to make the fiscal conservatism argument, the fact that even FDR and definitely Hoover were not willing to throw a bunch of money at the problem, and they were not willing to run a deficit. And remember, Keynes argued that you just got to run a deficit during hard economic times. You just can't worry about the debt at that point. Later on, when the private sector is expanding and we are seeing a growth in the economy, well, then the government can start paying off the debts that they made. So this is just I believe an economic thinker, a writer writing about what Keynes means, just quoting that idea of Keynes. So you could couple that with some other aspects of government spending. But there you go, ladies and gentlemen. That's the documents. Make your buckets. Pick 6 or 7 documents that you're going to work with. Fairly simple. I'm looking for good analysis, good explanation for how these different things caused the Great Depression. Show me your economic knowledge. One last thing, context. Don't forget to start with context. And this is, 4 to 6 sentences. So be generous. Tell a story. So what would context be for a DBQ about the Great Depression? We're talking, the 1920s were an incredible time economically. All boats were rising and people were getting wealthier and the stock market was growing. Americans had access to consumer goods like never before. The culture was changing. So anything about the 20s that's economic in nature. You could go back further and talk about World War I. You could say, World War I saw a boom in U.S. trade and industrial production. You could go back even further and say, the United States came out of the industrial era or the Industrial Revolution as this great economic power, and never was this power more evident than in the 1920s when Americans were inventing toasters and sewing machines and automobiles, and it was the glory times. However, the market in 1929 came to a sudden and screeching crash. Talking about the Depression itself is context. You can say the United States Great Depression was the greatest depression in the history of the whole country. It's the worst downturn the U.S. has ever seen. It caused unemployment to go to 25%, blah, blah, blah. Because the question is not what was the Great Depression. The question is what caused it. So what it was is context. If you want, you can say the United States has had recessions in 2009 and panics throughout the 1800s, and ups and downs in banking have plagued nations since the beginning of time. You could talk about the failure of the Roman Empire to regulate their banking industry, and that would be relevant context. But that's up to you. I'd start with some just stuff about the Roaring 20s leading to the terrible 30s, and etc. If you have any other questions, you guys, please just leave it as a comment on this video here. You can email me. You can ask again at our meeting on Wednesday when we come together as a class. But please reach out and make these DBQs awesome. They are. This is your last one, I think. I don't think I'll do another DBQ after this. So anyway, show me you can write and think. Love you guys. I am out. Actually, you know what? We're going to end with this. For those of you who stayed long enough, it's worth it, isn't it? Nice, Maddie. You see, it's as simple as that, people. It's as simple as that. You just do it. You just kill it is all you got to do. All right, I'm out. See you guys.